Well, it's Labour conference. Get Britain building again. That's going to be the message here from Liverpool, from the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, when she takes to the podium for a keynote speech here at midday.
And dating the EU, the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy said that Labour would look to rebuild relations with Europe after the very bitter divorce overseen by the Tories.
And the Rwanda plan is back in court. A hearing will get underway today at the Supreme Court to decide once and for all if the policy is legal. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, says he'll scrap it whether it's legal, working or not.
Get in touch this morning. Let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points. I'm here in London. As you've seen, Andrew is in Liverpool. He's going to have some great guests at the Labour Party conference, so stay tuned for all of that. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, here is your very latest news with Tamsin Roberts.
Beth, thank you and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 9:32. The UK is working to help British citizens in Israel as fighting against Hamas continues. A British man serving in the Israeli army has been killed while other UK citizens are still missing. Residents at a Palestinian refugee camp in Gaza City have been searching through debris this morning after retaliatory Israeli airstrikes by Israel. The country declared war after the surprise attack by the terrorist group Hamas on Saturday. The Prime Minister has condemned the appalling act of terror by Hamas, with more than 700 people killed in Israel and nearly 500 in Gaza. The government will defend its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in the Supreme Court today. During the next 3 days, several cases, collectively known as the Rwanda Appeals, will challenge the Court of Appeal's decision to halt resettling refugees. Some judges think there are issues with Rwanda's asylum system, making the government's plan wrong. But not everyone agrees, with one judge saying the challenge should be thrown out. The Labour Party is promising to restore hope with the plan to get Britain building. Speaking at the conference in Liverpool later, the Shadow Chancellor will announce party plans to revamp the UK's outdated planning system to boost the economy. Plans include fast-tracking applications for battery factories, laboratories and 5G infrastructure. Rachel Reeves will also promise to update national policy statements within 6 months of taking office. Well, you can get more on all of those stories. Just visit our website, gbnews.com. Now, though, it's back to Andrew in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference. Andrew.
Well, it's Labour's most important conference for many years, but it's being totally overshadowed by the Hamas attacks on Israel. I'm delighted to say joining me in the studio is the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann. Lord Mann, 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. This is the biggest security breach of Israel's borders in 50 years. First of all, how on earth did it happen? And where on earth is this going to end?
Well, how did it happen? I'm sure heads will roll, but that's something for the future.
Sure.
You know, who was asleep on the job, etc. But it did happen, and it's the biggest single issue in this conflict in our lifetime. That's how serious it is, and the brutality and the random brutality of what's happened. I think the fact that we're in the mobile phone era, people have gloried with the most horrific videos of themselves murdering and raping people. Any decent person would be shocked by that, horrified. And the view, imagine if it happened to our country here. The country would have been riotous turmoil of wanting revenge.
Yeah.
Revenge is dangerous, but and there are, including British citizens, kidnapped, young children, 2, 3, 4-year-olds kidnapped. This is beyond anything. And you know, Hamas is a terrorist organisation, officially.
Yeah.
Backed by
the European Union, Britain, America.
In law.
Yeah.
As is Hezbollah, who've weighed in. tried to wane from the north, from Lebanon. And this is an attack on our values. In many ways, an attack on us. It's an attack on democracy, and it has to be resisted at every level. And the two things that have encouraged me in all this horror. The first is, not surprising, there's been unity across the political spectrum in the UK.
Sure.
The whole political spectrum.
Yeah.
This isn't a question of argument. And that's what I expected, but I can report to you that is the case.
Yeah.
I'd be horrified otherwise. The other, just a little snippet, fascinating. The protests at the Iranian football match. Significant numbers protesting when they put up the Palestinian flag. It's not the first time in Iran there have been workers' protests against their support for Hamas in the past, and big ones. But that broke out as well yesterday, and I think across the world people are saying this is beyond anything in our comprehension. And what's going to be done about the hostages?
Well,
massive problem for the world.
This is medieval savagery. We agree on that. We know Iran is involved, and so America's sending warships to the region.
Behind it. I mean, Iran is behind it.
And funding it. It has the potential to become, well, it's already a major flashpoint, Lord Mann, but what can Britain, what can the United States, what can the United Nations do here?
Well, they need to be working together. I think there are a lot of forces. I mean, the timing of this, I think without question, the fact that there was going to be a Saudi-Israel accord. I think peace deal might be overstretching what it was going to be, but an accord and a major change is a factor.
And Iran would have wanted to destabilise that.
It does want to destabilise that. So you've got the Saudis, you've got the Gulf states, Morocco as well, who've reached an accord with Israel in recent times. So that situation's very different. And the vast majority of the world and world leaders and world powers are aghast at this. So Hamas have isolated themselves, but I mean, Hamas have to be destroyed as an organisation, as an entity.
When you say destroyed, do you mean militarily?
Well, that's going to happen one way or other. Hamas do not represent anything other than war.
But they are in control in the Gaza.
And these attacks from the Gaza have to stop. We've kind of been a little blasé with rocket attacks repeatedly at civilians in Israel, and perhaps because the Israelis have got a very effective defense system and manage to intercept virtually every rocket. I think we've all become a little blasé. These attacks, random indiscriminate attacks on civilians by Hamas, have been a regular thing for many years. This simply takes it to a new and a barbarous level, and they're the most horrific.
Israel is one of the most sophisticated military fighting machines, Lord Mann, so they can surely target their response on the Hamas fighters rather than on innocent civilians.
Correct, and that's what would be appropriate, and that will be difficult, but the more effective, an effective response to this is not a randomised response, it's a very precise response, and it's not to attack the Palestinian people, it's to take out Hamas and the Hamas leaders. And the Arab states can assist in this. The pressure to break Hamas has to be worldwide and has to incorporate key players in the Middle East.
The hostages change everything in one sense, Lord Mann, because they are grandmas, children. We saw the terrible scenes at the massacre at the rave. That is going to put enormous pressure on Western governments to do deals behind the scenes to get those hostages out. Should they do deals if necessary?
Well, look, we've got German, we've got American, we've got British hostages. Other countries, including Asian countries as well, appear to have hostages. So this is a UN crisis. I think that the big world powers will be all over this. Deals, no, not deals, release.
Right.
The release of these children and grandmothers, and the release of them unharmed. This is also an issue for the Palestinian Authority. I mean, what's the point of a Palestinian Authority?
Where are they?
If they are not in the middle of sorting out the hostage crisis.
You've been a veteran observer of the Middle East, what's been going on between Gaza and Hamas and Israel. Because I can tell from just talking, even you are shocked by what's happened this time.
Oh, I mean, this is
blood-curdling.
These are people. These people have families. You know, they have relatives in the UK. Some of them. You know, this is our problem as well as Israel's problem. And you know, when 2-year-old children are kidnapped, you know, that is not some kind of liberation force. You know, that is straightforward, brutal, terrorist murderers. Full stop. No argument, no discussion.
And parading mutilated bodies for the benefit of social media.
And that shows the depravity and collapse that Hamas has created. It's not a political organisation, it's a terror organisation in the way that is Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda, and has to be treated as such. And the state of Iran, being opposed by its own people, rigging its elections to stay in power, you know, the people of Iran are protesting and protesting at the moment against this. You know, the Ayatollahs are the masterminds behind that. Well, Iran's part of the process. The world needs to turn its attention on Iran.
How relieved are you, as here you were at the Labour Party conference, you were a Labour Party member for many years, Labour MP for many years, if Jeremy Corbyn had still been leader of the Labour Party, he's still a member of the Labour Party. A lot of people get confused. He's no longer in the parliamentary Labour Party, but he's still a member of the Labour Party, repeatedly questioned outside this conference centre yesterday, because the silly fool forgot to get his accreditation request in, refused to point-blank condemn the savagery of Hamas.
Well, this equivocation by Corbyn is not new, and you know, the equivocation impacted on this country directly. When I last came to this conference in Liverpool, 2018, I had to have police.
I remember.
I had to have the police because there were specific threats from Corbynites to me, violent threats, and the police were involved. So I came here with police assistance. That's coming to this conference. Thankfully, this is a different world now. And here, I mean, I've been repeatedly stopped by people, I don't know, young people, thanking me for taking a stance against anti-Semitism. People I've never met before in this conference. In fact, it's young people is very encouraging. One of the things we can take some comfort for is the Corbynites are so out on a limb of irrelevance. They're out of the Labour Party,
well,
and
Labour. Corbyn isn't, and I'm going to ask you: should Keir Starmer now stop messing about, stop dithering, and expel this terrible man from the Labour Party?
I don't expect Corbyn to be in the Labour Party much longer. I mean, he's finished.
Gone this week.
Corbyn is finished in the Labour Party. He's yesterday. He's an irrelevance. The Labour Party doesn't want Corbyn, and his equivocation on Hamas says it all. The response of any decent person is to want peace, is to want justice, is to want this brutality to be stopped and condemned. Where was Corbyn saying anything about these hostages? Nothing. I mean, the man, you know, beyond contempt, but the Labour Party now, as with all the main parties in this country, with the government, is stood united. That is a message from Britain. Our political leaders across the spectrum are united. We stand with Israel at this time. We stand with democracy at this time. We're appalled, horrified. We want to see Hamas broken.
Indeed we do. That's Lord Mann. He is, of course, the government's independent advisor on tackling anti-Semitism. Let us know your thoughts on this extraordinary situation that's unfolding in the Middle East. You email us at gbviews@gbnews.com. Back to you in the studio, Bev.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. It's a very sombre day, day 3 of the bloodiest attacks in 50 years in Israel. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com, even if it's just to reflect on the terrible human cost. The pictures this morning are awful. Young, beautiful souls, kidnapped, many of them at the moment. We think over 100 people have been kidnapped. Some of those will be Americans. Some of them may indeed be Brits. We'll be bringing you the very latest. We're going to have Charlie Peters in the studio not long from now to let us know the very latest on the situation. situation out there. Now, back home, the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing is set to be challenged in the Supreme Court from today. They will argue against the ruling that the policy to deport migrants to Rwanda is unlawful, as ministers struggle to achieve Rishi Sunak's pledge to stop the boats. Our reporter, Ray Addison, has all the details.
14th of June 2022, and all eyes are glued to live coverage of a plane sat idling on the runway at Boscombe Down military base in Wiltshire. The Boeing 767 was scheduled to fly the first group of migrants to Kigali, the capital city of Rwanda. But as the evening drew on, it became clear that the plane and the migrants were going nowhere. Legal challenges, including one from the European Court of Human Rights, meant the small number of passengers had now been whittled down to nothing. It was an embarrassing blow for then Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Home Secretary Priti Patel, who dreamt up the scheme to stop channel crossings.
The legal world is very good at picking up ways of trying to stop the government.
Since then, flights have been on hold as legal challenges progress through the courts. But the Rwanda policy has not been shelved, with first Liz Truss.
We're also taking decisive action by strengthening our borders and beefing up our border force and expanding the Rwanda scheme.
Then Rishi Sunak giving the scheme their full support.
We will pass new laws to stop small boats, making sure that if you come to this country illegally, you are detained and swiftly removed.
On the 19th of December last year, there was some good news for the government when the High Court ruled that the plan was lawful. However, that decision was overturned 6 months later when appeal court judges decided there was a real risk Rwanda could send migrants back to their home countries.
What the court today has found is that Rwanda is indeed not a safe country. People who were seeking asylum in this country would be at real risk had they been put on a plane to Rwanda.
But the government has refused to scrap the policy. Priti Patel's replacement, Suella Braverman, introduced the Illegal Migration Act, making it an actual duty for the government to deport asylum seekers who enter the UK illegally.
I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream.
Now today marks the beginning of the end of this slow legal process. A 3-day Supreme Court hearing in which the government will argue only it has the expertise to determine if Rwanda is safe. Although a decision's not expected until the end of the year, Rishi Sunak has already indicated that if they win, he'll ignore any further migrant appeals and injunctions from the ECHR. All of which mean the next flight might actually leave the runway. And that is when the true test would begin. If the boats keep coming, the last 3 years will have been for nothing, and the Rwanda policy will have turned out to be a Tory flight of fancy. Ray Addison, GB News.
Oh, fascinating film there by Charlie Lords. Now, Sacha Lord is the nighttime economy advisor for the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, and he joins me now in the studio. Andy, sorry, Sacha, you have been campaigning for a cut in VAT for the hospitality and tourism sectors here at the conference. You did the same at the Tory conference last week. You're going to have more joy here, do you think, as we have got Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, speaking in a couple of hours?
Do you know what? I met some of the Shadow Cabinet Ministers yesterday, Andrew, and it felt quite encouraging. They are listening, and that's something that the current government haven't been doing at all. This is not just me asking for this, it's the entire industry. So this is operators and trade bodies. We're all calling for this one thing. And fair play, what the government did when they reduced VAT to 5% and then...
Just during the pandemic?
During the pandemic. That saved many, many businesses and many jobs. The problem was they ramped it back up to 20% in such a short period, just 6 months. And when you compare the UK to Europe, the average is 8 to 9%. So this one single mechanism that if Labour were to form the next government, if they could introduce this at 12.5%, that would save businesses and jobs, especially those smaller family independent ones.
And which in part of your industry would be most affected? Is it pubs and restaurants?
Pubs, restaurants, bars. And, you know, there will be people watching this to say, well, you know, it's not a blank cheque. We're not asking for any money. And I think this is probably on the whole, self-funded. My main argument is, look, 12.5% of something is much better than 20% of nothing, which is a shut business. And we are seeing at the moment, every single day, 2 pubs are closing.
I'm just going to ask you, how many pubs are closing and how many would this stop closing in your view?
Well, we've lost just under 5,000 licensed premises in the last month. It's decimated.
It's a British way of life, the pub.
The pub, exactly. It's not just about going to have a pint. It's socialising. It's meeting your mates.
It is.
You know, my granddad used to go after
Just about
work.
to say, what about old Grandpa with his pint of brown ale that he's there for 2 hours and he has a chat to everyone?
2.5 hours. Yeah. Not great for the business, but
but the governor of the pub knows he's okay then.
Exactly. That's it.
At the Tory conference, I remember you caused huge irritation to the Tory leadership. Job of all of us is to cause irritation to all political leadership, in my view, because you had this constant running video running above the conference centre. What was that saying?
So during that whole period, as well as the Nighttime Economy Advisor for Greater Manchester, I have 2 businesses. I have Park Life Festival and I have the Warehouse Project. So Park Life Festival, there are 4,500 people during that weekend that work behind the scenes. The vast majority of those are freelancers. So if you think about the people that do the staging, the crew, the sound engineers, they were part of 3.8 million people that rebranded themselves the excluded. They got no support whatsoever from the government, and they've been paying their taxes. I know people have lost their homes, lost their marriages. Sadly, 32 people that we know of took their own lives during that period. They couldn't cope with the death.
They sort of fell between 2 stools, didn't they? And the government was deaf to pleas from people like you to sort it out.
So this was a reminder. And it ran consistently through the whole thing. And actually, it went viral. It had 3 million views. And it sent a strong message.
Today in her speech, Rachel Reeves, she's going to talk, I think it sounds like a stupid gimmick, not the first time a politician's done a stupid gimmick on either side of the political divide. She's talking about a czar to get back some of the money that was lost in fraud during the pandemic. Now, we know billions went missing. How is czar's going to do it? But there was a lot of fraud of some of the Chancellor's very generous schemes, wasn't there?
It's phenomenal. It's incredible. I don't want to mention names, but we know of one woman that got 220 million. She's yachting around the world. How is that right?
I know. So do you think that I think it's a gimmick, but never tapping into a resentment and a fury, isn't it?
It was
a lot of money. Nobody as it was, furlough and all the rest of it, so much went astray and it's never come back. It's
never come back, and we know about the VIP lanes, so I think it was a very smart decision. I'd like to think it's not a gimmicky thing. I'd like to see it followed through, because certainly people made tens of millions during that period.
Right. Just in 30 seconds, you work closely with Andy Burnham, the great Mayor of Greater Manchester. Do you think if he was the Labour leader, Labour would be much further ahead in the opinion polls? Don't sit on the fence.
I'm not going to, and I keep being asked this question. So I don't want Andy Burnham to be the Labour leader at the moment, because he's doing such amazing things in Greater Manchester. 2 weeks ago, he took buses back under public control. Greater Manchester is bouncing at the moment, and that's because of his leadership.
That's Sasha Lord speaking up highly for Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham, if you're here at the Labour conference, we'd love to hear from you. This is Andrew Pearce, Britain's Newsroom on GBNews. I'm in Liverpool at the Labour conference. Bev's in London. We are the People's Channel.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Mostly it is a relatively calm start to this new week, but we do have some fronts lingering around. So there's quite a bit of thick cloud for Northern Ireland, Southern Scotland, Northern England. Could bring some drizzly outbreaks of rain, particularly this morning, but easing off a touch later. The cloud that we've got pushing into western coastal areas will burn its way back to the coastlines, but the fog may linger in places as well. A noticeably drier day today for Scotland compared to what we have seen over the weekend. And into Wales, central southern areas of England, there will be some sunny spells developing into the afternoon as well. Temperatures notably above average for the time of year across the board, 17 to 24 degrees Celsius. Mostly fine end to the day as well, but that cloud in the west is going to start spreading its way back in, potentially pushing more across the Channel Islands and southern coastal areas of England as well. Meanwhile, it will turn breezier for northwest Scotland as rain begins to arrive in the early hours of Tuesday morning. A mostly mild night for most of us, though, holding up around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. Misty and murky across some coasts once again to start off Tuesday. Again, could be quite slow progress for that to burn back. Some central areas of England and Wales, though, getting off with a fairly fine day. The rain, though, pushing into northwest Scotland could provide some localised flooding because it's falling over very saturated ground from what we have seen over the weekend. So do take care here. But again, temperatures above average, 18 to 23 degrees Celsius. That rain will arrive across central and southern areas of the UK, though, as we head into Wednesday.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 a.m. on Monday the 9th of October. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce here in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference and Bev Turner, who's in London.
Very good morning. Israel at war. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that the UK is ready to provide any support that Israel needs. More than 1,000 Palestinians and Israelis have been killed by attacks from the Hamas terrorist group. Israel's Deputy Ambassador to the UK, Oren Mamor-Stein, has been speaking to GB News about one of many shocking videos on social media.
She has blood all over her body, grabbing her by her hair, and the terrorists shoved her into a car, and her eyes, petrified eyes, thinking what they're going to do to me.
Get Britain building again. That's the message from the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves when she takes to the podium here at midday for her keynote speech.
And dating the EU, the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy said that Labour would look to rebuild relationships with Europe after what they called a very bitter divorce overseen by the Tories.
And the Rwanda plan, it's finally in court. A hearing gets underway today at the Supreme Court to decide once and for all if the policy's legal. Meanwhile, get this, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he'd scrap it even if it's legal and working regardless.
We're going to have the very latest from the situation in the Middle East. We're going to be talking to somebody who is actually in Israel in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Those awful human stories are emerging all the time this morning. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. First, though, here is Tamsin Roberts with your latest news.
Bev, thank you, and good morning from the GB Newsroom at 2 minutes past 10. More than 1,000 people have been killed in Israel and Palestine. Residents at a Palestinian refugee camp in Gaza City have been searching through debris this morning after retaliatory Israeli airstrikes. Israel declared war after the surprise attack by the terrorist group Hamas on Saturday at a music festival. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has condemned the appalling act of terror. More than 700 people have been killed in Israel and nearly 500 in Gaza. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari from the Israeli Defense Force says Israel will restore security to its people.
Hamas was more barbaric and more brutal than ISIS. Let me be crystal clear. Israel will respond with determination and force to their unprovoked war crimes. The days ahead will be long and difficult. We have paid a heavy price, but we will restore security to the people of Israel.
War journalist Yara Eid says Israel should have expected the attack.
This attack of Hamas was not an unprovoked attack. It did not just come suddenly. This has been systematically. Israel is running an apartheid state. Let's ignore what's happening in Gaza for 1 second. What about the West Bank? How can we justify what's happening in Jerusalem? How can we justify killing of worshippers while they're just praying in the Aqsa Mosque? How can we justify the imprisonment of thousands of children? How can we justify the killing of 10,000 Palestinians since 2000?
A British man serving in the Israeli army has been killed while 2 other UK nationals are still missing. The Foreign Office is advising against all but essential travel to Israel as fighting continues. Virgin Atlantic has cancelled several of their scheduled flights travelling to Tel Aviv and back, and Wizz Air has cancelled all flights to the city until further notice. On to other news now. The government will defend its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in the Supreme Court today. Over the next 3 days, several cases, collectively known as the Rwanda Appeals, will challenge the Court of Appeal's decision to halt resettling refugees. Some judges think there are issues with Rwanda's asylum system, making the government's plan wrong. But not everyone agrees, with one judge saying the challenge should be thrown out. Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, told GB News how Labour plan to tackle the small boats crisis.
They've had 13 years. The problem has got worse, and they haven't got an actual plan that would help stop these illegal boat crossings. And what we set out is how we would do that differently. How we would use the money rather than wasting it on the Rwanda scheme. We would spend that money on a cross-border police force to make sure we could go after the criminal gangs who are responsible for these illegal boat crossings and stop them happening in the first place.
More than 400 criminals have been jailed for a total of more than 3,700 years after an operation by the Met Police. Operation Eternal investigated organised crime groups over a 3.5-year period by targeting an encrypted messaging platform. More than 3 tonnes of Class A and B drugs and nearly 50 guns were seized in the largest ever operation of its kind by the Met, with the force calling it unprecedented. Commander Paul Brogden says gang kingpins have been brought to justice.
These were the kingpins. These were the people who were operating and directing urban street gangs, dealing drugs, committing violence on the streets of London. So we think it's made a significant impact, and it's right that we bring these people to justice. They were leading lavish lifestyles. They were sitting there in their leafy enclaves. They didn't expect police to knock on the door, and we did, and we brought them to justice. I'm incredibly pleased about that.
Cleaners and security guards in Whitehall are among those going on a 5-day strike over pay. Members of the Public and Commercial Services Union will walk out today at the Energy, Business and Science departments. The workers were offered a 2.2% pay rise, with the union bosses describing it as insulting. The new action follows a strike last month. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Bev.
Good morning, thanks for joining us now. More than 1,000 people are believed to have been killed on both sides of the Israeli-Hamas fighting. It's the largest escalation in decades as Israel officially declares war. Israel continues to retaliate with a heavy bombardment of Gaza, but Hamas has continued to fire more rockets overnight. Joining me now to discuss this is GB News investigative reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, good morning. It's so shocking to see these images on Saturday, not least because of the number of civilian casualties being attacked over the last 3 days. We're in day 3 now. It's been a very fast-moving situation. What is the very latest?
Well, it's no doubt that the Israeli security establishment was caught completely off guard on Saturday. Both Shin Bet and Mossad, the Israeli versions of MI5 and MI6, are very aware that I think that they were not able to track these attacks. All of the intelligence, surveillance and the reconnaissance assets that you'd expect them to use to secure that southern border clearly did not do their job.
We had any explanation, Charlie, as to why that happened?
Not yet, but I think veterans of Shin Bet speaking to other news outlets have suggested that a full and frank discussion will happen after this conflict de-escalates. However, while that immediate reconnaissance pattern was a failure, we are now seeing, I think, the full might and the extent of the Israeli defence establishment stepping up their capabilities to recover what they have lost since Saturday, because they have lost a lot. This morning, the IDF said in their morning briefing that they are still fighting in 7 places across Israel.
That's the Israeli Defence Force.
That's the Israeli Defence Forces who are resisting the invasion of Hamas terrorists into their southern territories. This morning, we've seen images of Israeli paratroopers patrolling in towns and villages that, as of late of last night, were still held by Hamas fighters. Many of these towns, of course, still have kidnapped people being held by Hamas terrorists. And so it's an extremely delicate, precarious and violent situation which is ongoing. But we're now seeing, I think, after the failure of the reconnaissance and intelligence activities, the demonstration of Israel's military might as they seek to recover that position.
One of the most shocking sights of the attack, of course, was this festival that was happening, the Supernova Festival, a festival of peace, ironically, near the Kibbutz Reem. It's close to the Gaza Strip, predominantly young people there. Do we know how many people lost their lives at that festival?
Zakar, a humanitarian agency that recovers bodies during incidents like these. Unfortunately, Israel needs these agencies because of how many terror attacks and tragedies occur in the region. They've recovered, they say, up to 260 bodies at least. Now, in the last hour or 2, I've spoken to people who were eyewitnesses of the incident, who fled the attack, who said that they saw inhuman massacres, they saw unbearable acts, some of which have been reported overnight, details of which we shouldn't really discuss on air now, but the details are horrifying. And included in that, of course, there is a British element. We know that one Briton has been confirmed dead. He's Nathaniel Young, he's a 20-year-old. He was serving in the IDF. Now, when I spoke to the IDF last night, they said they can't confirm him as a casualty of the army, but his family have said that he was, the life of the party, and they've released images of him in a brown beret of the infantry of the IDF, so clearly a soldier. Other 2 that are missing, we have Jake and Dan Darlington. Now, Jake was working as a security guard at this festival, Jake Marlowe, and we've not heard from him since. Footage I've seen of this party, this Supernova rave on Saturday morning, just 15 minutes before the attack started, does show what you've described. A community of peace, a global festival of peace and love. What happens soon after is extremely terrifying.
And as the stories emerge, Charlie, it's just so shocking. I think Daniel might have been the one that I saw reported that he'd left the UK because of rising anti-Semitism here. And so he'd gone to Israel. These youngsters were having an amazing day. And just remind people how the invasion happened? Where did Hamas appear from, and by what means?
Well, the ground sensors clearly did not work, and so Hamas were able to breach through the border fence. IDF officials said that they weren't able to actually close up some of those positions, and this morning they said that they weren't able to confirm whether or not those access points had still been closed over 48 hours after the attack started. So most of the men poured through an ordinary route, just crossing the border, which is extraordinary. It's baffling considering the security apparatus down there. But we've also seen images of paragliding forces arriving. It has the hallmarks of a well-trained asymmetric force conducting really special operations. And it'll be very interesting to find out in the coming days just who trained them and how they pulled off this feat.
Yeah, and also how they funded this extraordinary attack. Charlie, thank you so much. If you want to see the latest, as Charlie said, he's interviewed at least one person from over there, Charlie. Yeah. Go onto the GB News website and have a look, gbnews.com. Now, questions are being raised, as we just discussed, about how the renowned Israeli intelligence services were caught so off guard. We're joined now by Efrat Fenningson, who's an Israeli independent journalist, and joins us now. Efrat, so good to see you. I'm so sorry about the circumstances under which we are talking. First of all, where are you, Efrat, and are you safe?
Yes, Bev, I'm based in Tel Aviv. Thanks for having me. Actually, as I'm preparing to go live on this broadcast, the sirens just came off and missiles are going again here in Tel Aviv. So, you know, I'm like a little bit shaky, but I'm fine. Okay. I'm doing okay, and my family's okay.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us this morning. You are a citizen journalist ordinarily in Israel. So tell us about Saturday morning. You wake up, it was a public holiday, I believe, in Israel. What happened?
Right, so Saturday morning, 6 a.m. with sunrise, sirens are going off, rockets start to go off around the center of Israel, which is not usual at all. And then we wake up to the news of what's happening around the Gaza envelope villages. We hear of multiple breaches of the border fence, which is very strange, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we start hearing about people that are locked inside their shelters in the Gaza envelope villages for hours and hours without any help coming. And this is very unusual. The army is not doing anything. The police is not there. There are no defense enforcement powers on the ground to help the people who are stuck. We're starting to hear about the music festival, 5,000 people in this music festival. The sightseeings from there are horrifying. Young adults are being ambushed and slaughtered. We're starting to see a lot of videos coming out, and people are sharing footage from the ground, which is very gory. Many of them were captured, tortured. We know of some young women that were raped even and later taken hostage. Many of these young adults are still missing, and their families are going crazy. People were stuck in their shelters. Terrorists, the Hamas terrorists, were burning down houses in order to get those people to come out and then capture them. So, and we know that the forces did not arrive sometimes 8 to 9 hours later, and in some cases even 12 to 24 hours later. So people were really blocked in their houses, which is crazy. Now, I just want to say, I'm always on the side of the citizens, of the humans, the side of truth and facts. And it's very unpleasant to me to ask all these questions, but I served in the intelligence forces 25 years ago as a soldier, and I know the security drills, I know the layers of defense that we have. I know the spreading of the forces that we're supposed to have on the ground, and nothing worked according to what I know, to what everyone that serves in the army knows, and it's most of the people in Israel. So you really don't have to be an expert on that. You just have to serve in the army to see how things work. And this was 25 years ago. Today, we have the most high-tech army in the world. We have all the top-notch technology. We have the most advanced weaponry systems. We have sensors all around this gate. If a cat moves by this gate, forces are being alerted in order to go there and check what happened.
Do you
feel not only
sorry, Efrat, but can I just ask you, like, do you feel now, as of today, of Monday, that those Israeli forces have stepped up? There has been significant bombardment from Israel overnight. Do you feel now that the Israeli people are being taken care of?
Well, they are, but we know of many terrorists still wandering around Israel, not just the Gaza envelope area, but now there are reports of terrorists wandering around the center of Israel. And we also hear of Hezbollah signs from up north. So, you know, it's hard to feel safe these days. It's hard for me to answer that. We know it's being taken care of. A lot of reserves have been called back for duty, and there is a lot of movement towards the places that needs to be secured.
And
however,
I'm just interested to know, is it easy to get out of Israel? Are there many people fleeing to leave the country?
Well, people are taking flights to get out, but and it's still possible. Yes, the airport is still open, and it's possible to leave the country. But I don't think many people are doing it right now. People are more busy with taking care of their families and friends that many of them are missing, and they have to be here to support the situation and also to support the people in need. People don't have a lot of food and shelter, and a lot of people are evacuated from their homes, and we need to take care of each other. I just want to say that yesterday, a Hamas soldier, a terrorist that was caught by the Israeli forces, he was quoted saying in his investigation, "We prepared for over a year." That's what he said. The demonstrations in Israel encouraged us. I don't know how true that is. It's been 5 hours till Israel started shooting at us. We were set up with 1,000 soldiers. We created 15 breaches in the border fence. We were surprised and shocked that the IDF is not waiting for us. And this is crazy that the IDF was not prepared for this. And we also know that Hamas has released video footage about 3 weeks ago of their exact plan on how they're going to penetrate and attack Israel. And we need to ask ourselves, how come this huge surprise attack is happening, even bigger than the Yom Kippur War, I would say.
OK, Efrat, thank you so much for bringing us that contribution this morning. Efrat Fenigson, they're an Israeli independent journalist. You can find Efrat on Twitter as well, where she does regular broadcasts about the situation. Now, let us know your thoughts this morning on all of our talking points, gbviews@gbnews.com. But let's go back to the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, where Andrew Pearce is holding the fort for us this morning. Andrew.
Certainly am. Thanks, Bev. Well, all eyes will be on Sir Keir Starmer, who's doing his keynote speech tomorrow afternoon, even though the conference runs till Wednesday. So does he have what it takes to be the PM? Delighted to say here in the conference with me is Luke Trill, who is the director of More in Common. Now, you've done a lot of focus groups, but before we talk about them, what is More in Common?
More in Common was set up in 2016 following the very tragic murder of Joe Cox, and our mission is to try and tackle...
That was the Labour MP.
Labour MP.
Murdered by a right-wing fanatic.
Right-wing extremist in 2016. And we were set up basically to try and look at how do you tackle polarisation in society, find common ground. And one of the main ways that we do that is to try and shine a light on what the public really think about issues, to try and bridge that gap between what you might call elite thinking, those in positions of power, and what the public think, and try and identify how you move forward on some of the big issues of our day.
Now, you do a lot of polling, you do a lot of focus groups. Just so people know, a focus group, you talk to groups of floating voters, not attached to any political party, whether it's in Workington or Swindon, wherever. There's quite a encouragement for Sir Keir Starmer in one way, but not so much in another. Explain, Luke.
So what we find from our research in both the polling, which is the quant, and the focus groups where you talk to people in those groups, is that people think it's time for change.
Yeah.
In fact, we had a poll a couple of weeks ago when 75% of the public said it needed to be a change of government. The interesting thing, though, is if you ask them, would Labour do a better job, the margin narrows significantly. In fact, the public are only about 5 points more likely to say that Labour would actually do a better job.
Well, that means a lot more work to be done by Keir Starmer and his troops here this week and between now and the election.
Absolutely. Like, the public have no doubt that, they think the country's broken. They think things can't carry on as they are. But there's a bit of frustration that they're not hearing from Keir Starmer what his Labour Party would do differently. There isn't the equivalent of that. You remember the Blair pledge card?
Oh, yeah.
The 5 things. People just want to hear. It doesn't have to be a grand vision, but it's got to be 2 or 3 tangible things that Labour would do better.
And he has got 5 pledges, but I can't remember the life in what they are. And if you stop most people in this conference, Luke, they would struggle too, including Labour MPs.
Absolutely. I think, Keir's missions are, they're an interesting set of statements. But you contrast them actually to Rishi's pledges, which are much more boom, boom, but we'll do this, this, and this. Whereas the missions are much more intangible for people.
It's something about economic growth.
Exactly.
Which something to do with we will be the growth in the G7. Rishi, of course, has his pledges, which he might not reach, to small boats, inflation. But go back into Keir Starmer. People think he's ahead of Rishi Sunak, but they think he's a grey man and they don't know what he stands for.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that Keir has is there is a big anti-politics mood at the moment.
Yeah.
So people are willing to give him a chance at the moment to be Prime Minister. They certainly don't find Rishi Sunak very relatable, and his wealth comes up a lot as an issue. Is that a big issue? It is a big issue, and particularly some of the sort of wealth gaffes. You remember when he borrowed that Prius, or he went to the building site in Prada
£900 shoes.
That cuts through, not because people are anti-wealth, because they say, you don't go to a building site in shoes like that, So that's a big challenge. And the challenge for Keir, though, is whether they think he's that different. So what's really interesting is lots of people assume, he comes from a background of wealth. His title, Sir Keir, lots of people think that's a hereditary thing, that he was born into money. And what they will often say is, look, he's really good at pointing out what's wrong, but very rarely offers a positive vision. And I think
classic solicitor.
Exactly, that's exactly what's come up in focus groups. And Boris Johnson, whatever his strengths and flaws, was very good at coining a nickname. And what's interesting is that Captain Hindsight nickname that Boris used really cut through with the public. Like, political slogans rarely do, that did. And I've had it played back to me in focus group after focus group.
That's Luke Trill. He's with that very fine organisation set up after the death of Joe Cox, More in Common. Stay with us. We're going to be taking a tour of the conference floor in just a few moments to see what the activists really think about what's happening here at Labour and beyond. We're GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Dry for many of us today, warm in the south, but still some rain in the north. Nowhere near as much as we saw across Scotland through the weekend, more than 100 millimetres widely across parts of central and western Scotland, leading to widespread flooding. Severe flood warnings still in force, but any rain today will be mostly light showers affecting the Western Isles into the west of the central belt. Otherwise, some brightness coming through for Scotland and more especially across the rest of the UK. There will be some sunny spells, some mist lingering around Irish Sea coast as well as southwest England, and there'll be some high cloud about as well. But still, with the sunshine, low to mid-20s in the south and feeling warmer further north compared with the weekend as well. Now, the mist and low cloud that we see around the coast through the afternoon will push inland somewhat overnight, so some dense fog patches forming across the south and west of the UK. Meanwhile, thicker cloud returns to Scotland with some outbreaks of rain pushing in by dawn. It's a mild night, but a cloudy start to the day on Tuesday and a wet start for western Scotland. Unfortunately, that rain coming on top of the very wet ground could cause further issues. Yellow rain warning in force, 50 millimetres in places. Not as much as we saw through the weekend, but we don't need any more rain, obviously. Now, the rain will push into parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England by the end of the afternoon. Drier further south and still warm.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
And 28, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce in Liverpool and Bev Turner here in London. Now, our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, is out and about at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. I bet they give you a really warm welcome there, don't they, Tom? Is everybody delighted to see you and greet you with a big hug?
I haven't yet had a big hug from anyone, Bev, but do you know what? It is actually quite a happy atmosphere here at the Labour Party conference. Let's see if we can take a little walk around the conference hall now, the exhibition zone of the conference floor. And this is live TV, so anything can happen, but we'll see if we can grab any Labour Party members as we go. Excuse me, sir, are you a Labour Party member? I've got a question. No, you're not keen? OK, no worries. Well, anything could happen. Excuse me, you're on the phone. This is going super, super well. Hello, sir. Are you a Labour Party member?
Yes, indeed.
I want to ask you a question about Jeremy Corbyn, because he's been speaking around at the Fringe at the moment. Should he be a Labour Party member?
I don't think he should be, because he has shown anti-Semitism, and we don't like that in our party.
So Keir Starmer should boot him out?
I think the policies of the party should be followed, and Jeremy Corbyn should not be a member. That's my opinion.
Well, thanks very much for speaking to us. Interesting stuff there. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn has been speaking at the Fringe, not at any official events so far at this Labour Party conference. But as you can see, lots of buzz and busyness here in Liverpool. Although I have to say, the general feeling I have from this conference is It feels more Tory than any of the previous Labour conferences I've been to. More people in suits, more flags, more union flags, I should say, fewer Palestinian flags, and indeed more corporate sponsors and exhibitors here as well too. Perhaps this is a changed Labour Party. Perhaps this conference is one that is looking towards government more than anything else. I think perhaps we'll just end here by having a little look at the Labour Party shop. Because it is a delightful thing. You can get a sock that says, "Sock it to the Tories." You can get an NHS-branded tote bag, or even a little, I don't know, a bandana for your dog. I'm not quite sure why you'd want to do that. And here we go. Perhaps this speaks to it all. A quote from Tony Blair for sale here at the Labour shop. "A new dawn has broken, has it not?"
Thank you, Tom. Well done. Why would you want a Labour-themed bandana for your dog? Well, it is all very strange. I'll tell you what I learned at the Conservative Party conference last week in Manchester is how much money actually the conferences generate for the parties. It's an interesting angle on these events. But anyway, still to come this morning, Sir Keir Starmer has declared that he would scrap the Rwanda border plan, even if it succeeded in slashing small boat arrivals. It's in court, of course, today. It'll be decided over the next few days. We're going to discuss if he's ideologically opposed to border controls, and more than 700 people, have been killed in Israel since Hamas launched its attacks on Saturday. On screen, we are seeing pictures of a refugee camp that was hit by Israeli airstrikes this morning. The pictures from the Middle East are absolutely shocking, and we'll be considering what the implications might be across the world and also over here. So thank you for joining us this morning. All of that and more after your morning's news.
Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 10:32. Here are the headlines. Well, let's just start with some news we've been getting in the last few minutes. Israel's defence minister has ordered a total blockade on Gaza, cutting off food, fuel and electricity. Residents at a Palestinian refugee camp in Gaza City have been searching through debris this morning after retaliatory Israeli airstrikes. Israel declared war after the surprise attack by the terrorist group Hamas on Saturday at a music festival. More than 700 people have been killed in Israel and nearly 500 in Gaza. Well, the Prime Minister will hold a Cobra meeting later to discuss the fighting in Israel and Gaza. Rishi Sunak has condemned Hamas's attack as an appalling act of terror. A British man serving in the Israeli army has been killed, whilst 2 other UK nationals are still missing. The Foreign Office is advising against all but essential travel to Israel as fighting continues, and many flights to Tel Aviv have been disrupted or cancelled. In other news, the government will defend its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in the Supreme Court today. Over the next 3 days, several cases, collectively known as the Rwanda Appeals, will challenge the Court of Appeal's decision to halt resettling refugees. Some judges think there are issues with Rwanda's asylum system, making the government's plan wrong. But not everyone agrees, with one judge saying the challenge should be thrown out. More than 400 criminals have been jailed for a total of more than 3,700 years after an operation by the Met Police. Operation Eternal investigated organised crime groups over a 3.5-year period by targeting an encrypted messaging platform. More than 3 tonnes of Class A and B drugs and nearly 50 guns were seized in the largest ever operation of its kind by the Met, with the force calling it unprecedented. Well, you can get more on all of these stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2185 and €1.1556. The price of gold is £1,519 and 16 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,530 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Still to come this morning, the Rwanda plan is in the Supreme Court as we speak, but Sir Keir Starmer says that he would scrap it anyway, even if it gets the green light. Let us know your thoughts on that. gbviews@gbnews.com. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10:39. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce in Liverpool and me, Bev Turner, in London today. I'm delighted to be joined. I've been a bit lonely here this morning, guys, on my own. Broadcaster Mike Parry.
You are lonely no more.
Oh, thank you, Mike. And author and journalist Emma Wolfe are here to talk about some of the other big stories of the day. Right, Mike, David Lammy, Shadow Foreign Secretary, has been making murmurs about the relationship that Labour might cultivate with the EU were they to become the government.
Yeah, I think it's more than murmurs, isn't it? I mean, David Lammy, as you say, Shadow Foreign Secretary, arch Remainer, you know, and has never made any secret of that. And when he says, oh, we'll start dating the EU, he's really just extending what Keir Starmer's position was revealed as being when he went to the conference in Canada, that, you know, we'll start following our guidance along EU lines. What I simply don't understand is, don't they realise that the British people are not stupid, and that if you look at the situation in Europe, we, the UK, are doing better than Germany, which used to be the powerhouse of Europe. Poland is doing better than Germany because they don't follow the EU lines that David Lammy's talking about. Italy and Britain are talking together to try and do something about the migrants crossing Europe. So that's European cooperation, which is very positive. But we all know what Labour's hidden agenda is, we think, is that more people will be welcome to come to this country if Labour get in than less. So I think he speaks with forked tongue. I'm not accusing him of being dishonest, but I'm saying that I'm not sure we've got it straight. Well, recently, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go on.
He went on a trip to Brazil to research green issues in the Amazon forest. 4 nights, 25,000 quid, £6,000 a night for a trip to the Amazon, and it was sponsored apparently by Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Now, you know.
Outrageous. Well, he was talking at a fringe event at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, and it was organised by the Tony Blair Institute. Emma, he's never very far away from these issues, is he? Let's be honest.
Isn't.
And he did tell the audience that Labour would not take Britain back into the EU, the single market or the customs union, and then he started adding list of things that they would do.
And then he started running away with himself. He starts talking about this very, very bitter divorce with the EU.
Yeah.
He's an embarrassment. It's alarming that he's our shadow foreign secretary. He could be. It was like when Diane Abbott was shadow. You just think they could be our foreign secretary this time next year. That is an embarrassment. He's allowed to share his political views, totally undemocratic, totally disrespectful to the British people. Politically, he's all over the shop. He's talking at these fringe events and on radio constantly.
But in a way, I like to hear this stuff because, do you know what? Then you are getting some clear water.
You get some clarity.
You're getting some clarity as to the differences between the parties.
Hasn't been there. He's shilly-shallied around it. At least David Lammy's nailing his colours.
I totally agree. I would call it more than clarity. I would call it the start of a suicide list because it's clearly not what the British people want. Whenever I hear anybody who was a Remainer talking about it, why can't they be gracious and say, actually, the benefits are there? We have the AUKUS deal with Australia. We've got a deal on Pacific trade. We were the first to get the vaccines rolled out. We helped Ukraine and the rest of the world followed. There have been tremendous positives from Brexit, which they totally ignore.
And we want most of those.
but even if you don't accept the benefits of those international trade deals that we are signing all over the world,
India.
even if you still have to be a drivelling Ramona, please just respect that the vote was democratic.
Exactly.
That is so disrespectful to the British people, I think.
Exactly.
People like David Lammy need to wind their neck in.
And in a way, all Labour have needed to do, as you've seen in the polls, is just to not cause any major ructions.
That's right.
And they could sweep the board, but they seem to be just walking into these
when you have
controversial...
Angela Rayner talking about misogyny at the
making that a
conference.
hate crime.
Making it a hate crime, but the venom, she was talking about private schools, the venom, the hatred that she feels towards... it's just frightening. When you have people like Angela Rayner and David Lammy and then Corbyn around the fringes... You know, it's going to be a tricky conference.
I totally endorse Emma's point there about seeing the real colours of Labour, because this, to me, is the very worst sort of Labour politician who is driven by ideology but not driven by practicality or the facts. And nothing's going to change the political brain that thinks like that.
I think Keir Starmer's going to try and get them in line because he needs to, because they've been out of control, out of power for so long, 13 years, that they can do this. They can talk about this stuff. But actually, he needs to say to them, guys, we need to steady the ship. We need to steady the ship. Just don't do anything wrong.
But there's this...
They haven't had a good conference thus far. I don't think so.
There's this fascinating question that lingers over all of this, which is who would be the Labour voter with these proposals? If what they would traditionally appeal to would, people who might want a little less immigration, perhaps, that I don't know who they appeal to anymore. Well, Brexit voters? No.
See, I still believe in the small C Conservative voter in this country, who I don't think ever reveals themselves until they get into the ballot box. I still think you're under pressure in this country to follow the herd, and I still think you are going to be wary of expressing certain views because of social media. You'll get badly attacked, and so a lot of people just stay quiet. It'll be fascinating to see at the end of this week whether the British populace, the voting population, think that Labour do have any alternatives. Because at the moment, it doesn't look like they have.
And that moment when the Israeli flag finally, too late, but finally went up on 10 Downing Street, I'm not going to comment, but when that did, I thought, do you know what? The Conservatives have a chance. Most people are not thinking about politics like we are 99% of the time. We've got a year. I think Sunak could pull this back. I think that Labour, as you say, Bev, they're all over the place. Because they're not... When they talk about, I don't know, funding poorer undergraduates by taxing the rich, by raising a levy on the rich. OK, who's that? There's going to be... That's going to upset a lot of people. They talk about their grandiose plans for social housing. They don't put any figures on it. They're just going to build loads more social housing. Where they are all over the place. They're alienating a lot of people with this kind of Brexit.
They can't. And Bev, the other point you're right on about them being all over the place, how on at the same conference can you have Rachel Reeves coming forward saying, I'm the friend of business, I'm going to grow the economy, and then Angela Rayner saying she's going to introduce so much red tape in the workplace that you can't possibly grow the economy if you're giving people 4-day weeks, 36 hours and 3 months off.
We're going to be talking to Labour MP Steve McCabe, actually, in the show with Before Midday, so we will hear what he has to say, and it would be really interesting to just ask him simply, who is your voter?
Yes.
Who is your Labour voter?
Because these policies are all over the shop, and then you have, you know, Starmer talking about Rwanda, which we'll probably come on to. You know, whatever the Supreme Court decide, he's not going to take any notice of that.
Talking of which, Emma Wolf, thank you for that fabulous segue. Let's talk about that. It's in the Supreme Court today to find out whether we will ever be allowed to activate the Rwanda plan and get potential refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers, you know, whichever banner those particular individuals fall under, on the planes to Rwanda, and therefore have this plan act as a deterrent, Mike. And Sir Keir Starmer's saying, well, either way, if it gets the green light, he's still going to scrap it.
Yeah, he's just said that. He insists he would scrap the Rwanda scheme without even knowing if it works or not. So, as you quite rightly say, the Supreme Court have started sitting today to come up with a result in about, is it 3 or 4 weeks?
Mid-November. Three-day hearing and they'll decide.
Yeah, about 4 weeks or 5 weeks or something like that.
He says it's too expensive, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, but we all know what he really means is
he said,
that...
I think it's wrong, it's hugely expensive, it's a tiny number and it doesn't address the real problem at source.
Yeah.
Because he's got a master plan.
Yeah, what is his plan instead? But I read some research which said what the government are banking on is getting 2,000 to 3,000 people returned to Rwanda. So if they get the decision from the Supreme Court, at that point, they believe it will have a positive effect on stopping people getting into boats and across the channel. That's what they need, 2,000 or 3,000 people. He is terrified, of course, of it working because it is totally against his instincts. His instincts have been leftish all along, to keep the borders open and let people keep coming. And that's what he thinks will appease his hard left while he's trying to go for these moderate policies.
But you see, what I find amazing for making this statement now is, as you say, Mike, it's about the ideology and not about the practicalities.
Yeah.
So even if he said, well, if we get the green light, let's give it 6 months. Yeah. Let's see if it works as a deterrent. But he's not even saying that. So therefore, he does suggest it's about the ideology, not about the practicalities.
Of course it is.
This is a lawyer, this is a former DPP saying, as the Supreme Court begin their hearings, that whatever they rule, even if it's legal, even if it's successful, but even if it's legal, he will overturn that plan. And he says he's got this plan to smash the criminal gangs behind the illegal channel crossings. We haven't heard what that is.
He was asked about it yesterday. He was asked about it yesterday. How is this plan going to work? Where do you start, you know, with the criminal gangs? The criminal gangs form one of the biggest industries in the world. It's a £1 billion industry, and Keir Starmer's going to sort it out, is he? And we're not just talking about people in Europe and Africa, we're talking about people in South America going to the United States. It's a massive industry, and he thinks he can smash it by, I used to be the DPP, you know.
Well, he sort of, when he talks about it, he makes it sound like it's almost just going to be him on the ground, like some sort of Indiana Jones character, doesn't he? He doesn't have a plan for it, does he? I will break the criminal gangs.
I will be there on the beaches.
That's what it sounds like. And we all would like that.
Lots of us think that Rwanda plan is a bit dodgy. I mean, it is expensive per person, all of that. Look, it's not the best idea. It's clearly being pursued now at all costs because they have to get it
They've got nothing else.
There's nothing else. There must be something better than this. I'm not a politician. I don't know what. Rwanda, to me, does sound a bit crazy that people come here and you put them on a plane and you send them 3,000 miles away. But better than Keir Starmer saying
I totally agree.
The criminal gangs.
I prefer, instead of calling Sir Keir Starmer the former DPP, I prefer to call him a qualified human rights lawyer, because that's what he's been since he became a lawyer, a human rights lawyer. And human rights lawyers have a job in life, and that is to try and use human rights to allow a lot of people to come into this country. They do.
Oh, I think we're going to take some live footage from the Supreme Court. I don't know if we're going to listen to this gentleman speaking at the moment. No, we're not. We're just going to, we are going to be watching this situation closely. Obviously, Emma, this has been a long time. You kind of remember that it was Priti Patel that when she was Home Secretary originally announced this plan. And I remember at the time, we've been on such a journey with this story, haven't we? Because I remember at the time thinking, is that a spoof? Yeah. It was like they'd sat down and come up with the
weirdest plan.
The strangest plan.
The most complicated, the most expensive. You remember when people were saying there's a plane on a runway and there's about 3 people, they're going to get on it, it's going to cost them thousands per person. But I think that the Rwanda issue is just ludicrous when you think about what kind of how it's been pushed and pushed and pushed, how they're just determined to get it through.
But it's the thing is that the issue with the Rwanda plan is this: we had Suella Braverman out there saying what a wonderful country this is, and it has a very young population because of the massacres and the genocide that they suffered from. They've got a very young population. It's a big digital hub. It's actually a very up and coming country. And she was there. There was a cricket pitch. It was looking very appealing, but of course, it is meant to be a deterrent. You can't be both, can you, Mike?
Well, yes, because if the eventual target is get to the UK, and if you get here, you're sent somewhere else, it doesn't matter where that anywhere else is. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And because we are one of the fairest countries in the world, we won't send people to somewhere where they're going to be ostracised and hurt. We will send them to somewhere where they'll be treated civilly. Just on this today, on the Supreme Court, the outcome of this is also going to define our future relationship with the ECHR, isn't it? Because we should no longer have to bow to the wishes of ECHR, either the Commission or the Court, should we?
That's a very good point. Ministers are confident they're going to get this through this time because it's a lot more right-wing. I don't think this makes Starmer look very prime ministerial to say that whatever they rule, as the hearing opens,
I agree.
Whatever they rule, he's not going to follow it.
I agree. That's
and as you say, he's a lawyer.
Well, I guess... Sorry, Matt, go on.
No, I was only going to say it's exactly the same as the Brexit result, isn't it? Oh, we don't care what the result was. Nothing to do with that. We're just going to ignore it. And yet the court might come out and say, it's OK, we can go and all that kind of stuff. No. I'm sorry, I'm Keir Starmer. I'm overruling even the highest court in the land decision.
What would you like him to say, Emma? What do you think a Labour voter would want to hear from Keir Starmer?
I think it's really simple. Whatever the Supreme Court opens today, it's a very important decision. We have a real problem with immigration, la, 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 la. Whatever they rule, we will look at those findings and we will respect the decision of the Supreme Court rather than, as you say, the ECHR.
Yeah.
Because it repeats what the British people surely want.
Repeatedly, immigration comes out in the top of the priorities for the British people, for government. And yet he must believe there is a base that vote for Labour that don't want
I think that's why they're so misguided, and that's why I talk about the small C Conservative voter. Yeah. Because remember, the 80-seat majority came from the Red Wall. Northern people who are small C Conservatives who like standing on their own 2 feet, earning money to put food on the table for their family, all that kind of stuff.
Right, Mike and Emma, thank you so much for now. Right, let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. I am reading your emails as they're coming in. I promise I will get to them soon. But still to come this morning, we're going to have the very latest on the awful scenes from the Middle East with Israel hitting back at Hamas. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Dry for many of us today, warm in the south, but still some rain in the north. Nowhere near as much as we saw across Scotland through the weekend, more than 100 millimetres widely across parts of central and western Scotland, leading to widespread flooding. Severe flood warnings still in force, but any rain today will be mostly light showers affecting the Western Isles into the west of the central belt. Otherwise, some brightness coming through for Scotland and more especially across the rest of the UK. There will be some sunny spells, some mist lingering around Irish Sea coasts as well as southwest England, and there'll be some high cloud about as well. But still, with the sunshine, low to mid-20s in the south and feeling warmer further north compared with the weekend as well. Now, the mist and low cloud that we see around the coast through the afternoon will push inland somewhat overnight, so some dense fog patches forming across the south and west of the UK. Meanwhile, thicker cloud returns to Scotland with some outbreaks of rain pushing in by dawn. It's a mild night, but a cloudy start to the day on Tuesday and a wet start for western Scotland. Unfortunately, that rain coming on top of the very wet ground could cause further issues. Yellow rain warning in force, 50 millimetres in places. Not as much as we saw through the weekend, but We don't need any more rain, obviously. Now, the rain will push into parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England by the end of the afternoon, drier further south and still warm.
So, still to come this morning, we're going to have more from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, will be there. Piers Pottinger's going to be in the studio with me as well. And we'll have the very latest on the situation in Israel. Do not go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Monday the 9th of October. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce here in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference and with Bev Turner in London.
Israel at war. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that the UK is ready to provide any support that Israel needs. More than 1,000 Palestinians and Israelis have been killed by attacks from the Hamas terrorist group. Israel's Deputy Ambassador to the UK, Oren Mamel-Stein, has been speaking to GB News about a shocking video on social media.
She has blood all over her body. Grabbing her by her hair, and the terrorists shove her into a car. And her eyes, petrified eyes, thinking what they're going to do to me.
Get broad and building again. That's the message from the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. She's going to be Britain's first woman Chancellor if Labour wins the election, and she takes to the podium here at midday.
And Rwanda Planning Court, a hearing will get underway today at the Supreme Court to decide once and for all if the policy is legal. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer said that he would scrap it regardless of the outcome. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. As always, first though, here's your very latest news with Tamsin.
Bev, thanks very much, and good morning from the GB Newsroom at 11 o'clock. Israel's defence minister has ordered a total blockade on Gaza, cutting off food, fuel and electricity. Israeli media says 300,000 reservists have been called up in the largest ever draft in the country. Israel declared war after a surprise attack by the terrorist group Hamas on Saturday. More than 700 people have been killed in Israel and nearly 500 in Gaza. And here are some live pictures of Israeli soldiers gathering in Ashkelon, that's near Gaza. Now, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari from the Israeli Defence Force says Israel will restore security to its people.
Hamas was more barbaric and more brutal than ISIS. Let me be crystal clear. Israel will respond with determination and force to their unprovoked war crimes. The days ahead will be long and difficult. We have paid a heavy price, but we will restore security to the people of Israel.
War journalist Yara Eid says Israel should have expected the attack.
This attack of Hamas was not an unprovoked attack. It did not just come suddenly. You know, this has been systematically, Israel is running an apartheid state. Let's ignore what's happening in Gaza for 1 second. What about the West Bank? How can we justify what's happening in Jerusalem? How can we justify killing of worshippers while they're just praying in the Aqsa Mosque? How can we justify the imprisonment of thousands of children? How can we justify the killing of 10,000 Palestinians since 2000?
Well, here in the UK, the Prime Minister will hold a Cobra meeting to discuss the fighting in Israel and Gaza. A British man serving in the Israeli army has been killed, while 2 other UK nationals are still missing. The Foreign Office is advising against all but essential travel to Israel as the fighting continues. Many flights to Tel Aviv have been disrupted or even cancelled. And Rishi Sunak has condemned Hamas's attack as an appalling act of terror. Well, Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy says the Labour Party supports Israel's right to defend itself.
There is never a justification for terrorism. Labour stands firmly in support of Israel's right to defend itself, rescue hostages and protect its citizens. The hostages so cruelly taken, including children, should be released immediately, and Hamas's indiscriminate attacks set back the cause of peace.
Let's look to some other news now, and the government will defend its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in the Supreme Court today. Over the next 3 days, several cases collectively known as the Rwanda Appeals will challenge the Court of Appeal's decision to halt resettling refugees. Some judges think there are issues with Rwanda's asylum system, making the government's plan wrong, but not everyone agrees, with one judge saying the challenge should be thrown out. Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, told GB News how Labour planned to tackle the small boats crisis.
They've had 13 years. The problem has got worse, and they haven't got an actual plan that would help stop these illegal boat crossings. And what we set out is how we would do that differently. How we would use the money rather than wasting it on the Rwanda scheme. We would spend that money on a cross-border police force to make sure we could go after the criminal gangs who are responsible for these illegal boat crossings and stop them happening in the first place.
More than 400 criminals have been jailed for a total of more than 3,700 years after an operation by the Met Police. Operation Eternal investigated organised crime groups over a 3.5-year period by targeting an encrypted messaging platform. More than 3 tonnes of Class A and B drugs and nearly 50 guns were seized in the largest ever operation of its kind by the Met, with the force calling it unprecedented. Commander Paul Brogden says gang kingpins have been brought to justice.
These were the kingpins. These were the people who were operating and directing urban street gangs, dealing drugs, committing violence on the streets of London. So we think it's made a significant impact, and it's right that we bring these people to justice. They were leading lavish lifestyles. You know, they were sitting there in their leafy enclaves. They didn't expect police to knock on the door, and we did, and we brought them to justice. I'm incredibly pleased about that.
Cleaners and security guards in Whitehall are among those going on a 5-day strike over pay. Members of the Public and Commercial Services Union will walk out today at the Energy, Business and Science departments. The workers were offered a 2.2% pay rise, with the union bosses describing it as insulting. The new action follows a strike last month. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Bev.
Thank you for joining us. It's 11:06. So Israel's Defence Minister has ordered a total blockade on Gaza, cutting off food, fuel and electricity. More than 1,000 people are now believed to have been killed on both sides of the Israel-Hamas war. It's the largest escalation in decades. Israel continues to retaliate with a heavy bombardment of Gaza, but Hamas has also continued to fire more rockets overnight. Well, joining me now to discuss this in more detail, political commentator Piers Pottinger. Piers, you often come in and we talk about some light-hearted topics, some political issues which seem relevant. On a day like today, those sort of disappear into the background. This is horrific, what is happening out there.
I mean, it's absolutely horrific, obviously. And Hamas are terrorists. They're a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. What's more worrying is the wider repercussions of this. The head of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, was watching all the horror from his office in Qatar. And he is supported by Qatar as well as Iran and Syria. And, of course, a lot of this has got to do with Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has a sort of pact with Israel, which was signed very recently. And the Saudi is no friend of Iran, obviously, and Qatar and Saudi have a very uneasy relationship. So the whole Middle East is going to be, it's a tinderbox, bits of which have already exploded. The US are sending in carriers, and Britain has promised support. It is horrific. I mean, the loss of life and the innocent people being butchered in the way they were by these terrorists is unforgivable and should be condemned by everyone, particularly people in the Labour Party, who, of course, have a history of supporting Hamas, and something they should be quick and do more to distance themselves from. Jeremy Corbyn, for example, is at the Labour Party conference. He's still a member of the Labour Party. Why? These people are terrorists, and nobody should be endorsing them at all.
The breaking news is that America has sent the biggest warship in the world to Israel.
Right.
To what extent do you think, Piers, we're going to see America, and also that you would be comfortable with?
Well, I'm not comfortable with any of it because, no. I mean, we're you know, this can escalate so quickly, and we have some very trigger-happy people around. But America is very committed to supporting Israel, and I'm not at all surprised they've sent the biggest warship. They want to send a big message. And, I mean, the only hope is that this is going to stop quickly. I mean, Israel were bound to retaliate after the horrific attack by Hamas. And also, it was a very unusual lapse of intelligence by Israel. Normally, they're very good at spotting what's coming, but they weren't in this case. And that's also worrying, the fact that Hamas were able to outsmart Israel, who are normally the smartest on the intelligence front.
We had a journalist from Israel, Efrat Fenigson, who was on earlier, and she was saying that ordinarily, and she used to work for the intelligence services in Israel, a cat crossing that border would set off an alarm. She said, how is it possible that they were caught napping? It was a public holiday, but that shouldn't have any bearing on how weak those defences were.
I mean, Hamas were very clever, there's no question about it.
Paragliders, arriving by paragliders.
They used all kinds of different techniques, but they outsmarted the Israelis. And but the retribution by Israel has already started, and I think that isn't going to be very pleasant to read about either, or to witness. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're talking about thousands of civilian lives at risk here, many of whom who've been lost already. It's a horrifying situation, and unfortunately, I'm not particularly confident in Joe Biden's ability to pull this together, because this is a situation that requires a strong US president. I think we've got a relatively strong Rishi Sunak in our camp, because whatever you say about Rishi, he's very sound on foreign policy.
Yeah.
And I've no doubt he'll do the right thing. But with Biden...
It's very worrying.
And again, Americans have a tendency to overreact. Thank goodness Trump isn't president. I hate to think what would have happened, because he, of course, is a huge supporter of Israel. The Republicans get more money from Israel than any other part of the political sphere in America. The Israelis are their biggest donors.
One of the surprising things about Trump's reign as president, though, was how peaceful that period of time was. Perhaps because he was known to be a little unpredictable. Nobody wanted to poke the bear in that situation, whereas Biden looks incredibly weak.
Well, that's the point. I mean, Trump was unequivocal in his support for Israel. Biden is going to be more cautious. And also, I mean, if you watch Biden's performances, I mean, goodness only knows what he's actually thinking.
Yeah.
I just hope he's got the right advisors around him, because what happens with Israel, I mean, America is going to now be the key factor in the future of this conflict, and whether it gets resolved quickly or not. And my fear is this is going to drag on for a long time.
Of course, the implications as well with this being the Middle East are related to oil and gas.
Yes.
And that the fuel, we have, as we know, our bills in this country are huge. This is not going to help. Piers.
No, well, the price of oil this morning has soared, and I mean, that was predictable. And of course, it will have an effect on everyone, yes. The implications just go wider and wider the more you look at this conflict, and some of the horrific possibilities of dragging more and more people into this conflict.
Can I just ask you about the fact that the BBC still don't describe Hamas as a terrorist organisation?
Yes.
Why?
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, they did the similar thing with the IRA at one point when they were killing our civilians and soldiers. No, of course it's preposterous. I mean, the BBC's own ridiculous agenda is absolutely outrageous. I mean, tonight they're doing an absurd 4-hour documentary on Jimmy Savile, who they celebrated, nurtured, employed, and they call it a factual drama, even though it's got huge fictitious moments in it, like Jimmy Savile confessing to a priest about his horrible crimes, which he never did, and they admit is fictitious. Why are licence payers paying the BBC? How much did Steve Coogan get paid for 4 hours of this so-called drama? And who wants to see 4 hours about probably one of the most horrible celebrity perverts in British history?
That's right.
I mean, it's nonsense. The BBC have lost the plot. We know that.
Well, you'd be much wiser.
And that's why more and more people are watching the People's Channel.
And to watch GB News at 9 o'clock tonight rather than that rubbish. Right, we've got this big event in the Supreme Court. The Rwanda policy. This has been rumbling on, Piers, for so long now. And Keir Starmer has come out today and said, well, even if it is given the green light and we can put people on those aeroplanes, he's going to scrap it anyway if he becomes Prime Minister. Minister. What an extraordinary thing to say.
Well, of course, I mean, this Labour conference is absurd. I call it, they put the con in conference. I mean, first of all, he says he's going to scrap that because it sounds populist thing to say. But equally, he's talking about a deal with the EU to take more immigrants, legal immigrants, more share. So he's actually going to increase immigration. It's rather like the financial policies they're talking about that just don't add up.
But he must think, I mean, look, all these politicians do focus group after focus group now. He must believe there is a contingent of voters out there who would agree with him on that.
I'm sure he does, because that's everything about this ridiculous conference they've got, which incidentally shouldn't be at this time. The Conservatives made a big mistake letting them come last. The Conservatives traditionally would have been last, and for some reason they let Labour come last, so they had a really good opportunity to jump on everything at the Conservative conference, which wasn't difficult to do, by the way. But I do feel that you know, what he's saying is nonsense, and we should be able to determine our own immigration laws. Nobody else. Us as a country, and that's what this argument is about. Starmer loves to go with the flow. I mean, that's why I was hoping Andrew up at the Conservative conference was buying me a pair of Keir Starmer flip-flops.
They were $16.99, Piers Potter. I think that's quite expensive for a pair of flip-flops.
That's too much. That's too much.
You're worth it, and I should have brought you a pair back. I'm sure you can buy them online. Piers, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Not at all.
OK, let us know your thoughts this morning. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.com. Andrew, you are there at the Labour Party conference. How's it all going this morning?
It's going pretty well, really, and not least because I've got with me our fabulous Deputy Political Editor, Tom, and Piers Pottinger and Bev having a proper discussion there, quite right, before we talk about what's happening here. It's outrageous that the BBC are not calling Hamas, who've just carried out one of the most medieval assaults in our lifetime. They're not calling them a terrorist organisation. They're terrorists.
Well, the United Kingdom government designates them as terrorists. The American government designates them as terrorists. Even the European Union designates them as terrorists. And clearly, an assault on unarmed civilians at a music festival, hundreds dead, 1,000 dead, I think, is the last death toll that is published. No doubt that will rise. I mean, this is a terrorist atrocity. It is, however, the BBC's official style guide to avoid using the word terrorist wherever possible. So they're using the word militants. But it does seem to me that this style guide seems pretty crass, pretty out of place, and pretty out of date.
Yeah. Now, Tom, in about midday, the highlight of the day, I bet you can barely wait. The excitement is building here. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, she makes the keynote speech today. If the Labour win the election, and it feels to me and you, the mood here, like they will, she'll be Britain's first woman Chancellor of the Exchequer, but she's facing some rather unflattering comparisons to a certain woman Tory politician. Tell me more.
She is. This morning, the buzz on everyone's lips is Rachel Reeves the new Liz Truss? Which perhaps is not the accolade that she wants to be compared to, but it is interesting because this is precisely what Rachel Reeves will be talking about today. She probably won't use the words supply-side reform, but that's exactly what she'll be talking about boosting the supply side of the economy, growth by deregulation. Now, this is incredibly Trussite, right? So what she's talking about is particularly with regard to energy infrastructure, sweeping away some of the red tape, some of the green red tape, what are known as environmental impact assessments. It's likely that those are going to be massively reformed in her announcement and removed for green projects. So if you want to build a wind farm or put up some interconnecting pylons or whatever, they won't need the same level of green paperwork that currently projects do. Now, can you imagine if the Tory government were to propose this? If they're stripping away protections for the environment, if they're ripping up red tape and bureaucracy, about dismantling the regulatory state. But this is precisely what Rachel Reeves is talking about, and particularly, this is why businesses are interested in what Labour is saying. They're talking about getting the government out of the way. It sounds pretty free market.
And just a few weeks ago, the Labour Party opposed in the House of Lords and defeated stone dead Michael Gove's attempts to enable building far more houses by getting rid of a regulation. and environmental regulation.
This is the problem, right? It's very easy for the Labour Party, the Labour opposition. I almost said the Labour government. We're not quite there yet.
Soon.
Likely soon. A 20-point lead in the polls that has been borne out by by-elections. But it is clear that it's much easier to say something at a podium than it is to vote for something in Parliament or to encourage your MPs to vote for that thing in Parliament. It's very easy for the Labour government, when it's elected, if it's elected, to say, we're going to deliver planning reform. It's easy to say because that's what Boris Johnson did.
He did.
And he tried to do it and he was defeated in the House of Commons. He withdrew the white paper. David Cameron tried to do it. Nick Boles' planning reform that was then watered down and withdrawn. Liz Truss even tried to do it with her enterprise zones that included planning reform within them, and of course that was all defeated and blown up with the rest of her reform agenda. Time and time again in the last 13 years, governments have tried to do similar things to what Rachel Reeves will be announcing at midday today, and when it comes to the crunch, when it comes to interest groups, whether it's the RSPB saying we need to protect the birds and the wildlife, or just local communities saying I don't want my views spoiled, it tends to be much, much harder in the actuality to deliver this stuff.
And if a government with a majority of 80 couldn't do it, Boris Johnson's, I mean, we don't know what majority Labour get if they get one, it's going to be very difficult, isn't it?
Incredibly difficult, and especially in our representative system, first past the post, MPs represent local areas. No doubt within these local areas we will hear groups say we don't want that here, we don't want this sort of liberalisation. It's going to be very, very tough. We're going to see fights, I think, between a Labour government and its Labour backbenchers over precisely these issues. It's the same fights that we've seen the last few Tory Prime Ministers having over similar issues. But it is interesting and it is clear that the Labour Party views this as the way they're going to get growth, by getting rid of red tape, by dismantling some of that regulation that in some cases has been with us since Clement Attlee. The Town and Country Planning Act of 1948 still governs a lot of construction in this country. It's one of the big nationalisations that Attlee did that even Thatcher didn't touch. So it's pretty stark to see the Labour Party here saying, to some extent, they'll be more radical than Thatcher when it comes to deregulating building things in this country.
All right, that's Tom Hart. She speaks at this conference around midday. Still to come, I'm going to be talking to the Labour MP Steve McCabe in here in the conference about his party's plans to revive the economy. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Andrew Pearce here at the Labour Party conference. The time is 11:26. With me here is Steve McCabe, the MP for Birmingham Steady Oak. Steve, I want to talk to you about what's coming out of this conference, but I have to talk to you first about the horrific scenes unfolding in the Middle East.
Well, it's almost indescribable, Andrew. If anyone ever had any doubt about Hamas, they shouldn't have it now. They are ugly, vicious terrorists. They are indiscriminate in the things they do, and they've unleashed the most horrendous series of events in the Middle East.
You say if anyone's got any doubts, I will just ask you one question about this before we move on to the conference. Your former leader, Jeremy Corbyn, seems to have doubts because he pointedly would not condemn Hamas for the unprovoked assault on Israel. Children massacred, the rave, you saw 250 possibly gunned down by Hamas. And Corbyn, is it time to kick him out of the party altogether?
Well, of course, he's not a member of the parliamentary
But he's a member of the Labour Party.
Yes, and I think events there will take its course. Look, as far as I'm concerned, Keir Starmer and David Lammy speak for me and they speak for Labour, and they've been unequivocal in their condemnation. This highlights one of the fundamental problems with Jeremy Corbyn. He's never been able to determine who's right and who's wrong.
Pretty damning. Now, the Labour conference, Rachel Reeves speaks today, Keir Starmer tomorrow. How does it feel to you, veteran of conferences? You haven't won a general election since 2005. I've been coming to these conferences probably as long as you have. There is a sense of expectation in the air, isn't there?
Yeah, I think this isn't like 96. There's not the euphoria and the...
This is the one before Blair won his landslide.
Yes, I think it's more, there is a quiet determination here. I think it's quite a serious conference. There's a lot of hope after events like the by-election in Rutherglen. There's a lot of hope, but I think it's actually quite a serious conference. I believe it is a conference about preparing for government, and I think folk are being disciplined, they're being thoughtful, and they are really trying to put on show to the public this is what Labour offers.
Is there a danger, Steve, of Labour being overcautious? So I was speaking earlier to a guy who's done extensive focus groups, the group set up after the death of Joe Cox, and every focus group shows Labour way ahead, but says the same thing about Keir Starmer. Who is he? What's he stand for? He's that lawyer bloke, isn't he? Lawyers are very good at saying what's wrong, not very good at saying how to fix it. Is that a problem?
Well, I don't think I would entirely accept that analysis, but obviously I think we'll see a lot more of Keir tomorrow. I would say that we're in the phase where we have to do more about enthusing people and showing that things will change and can change under Labour, but I think that's the phase we are in now.
Because what More in Common was the guy I was speaking to, Luke Trill from More in Common. He said that the focus group show, yes, taught the Labour Party ahead, but not because of this great passion and conviction that, like Blair, there was a great zeal for Blair. He was the young radical. People really wanted him to win. It's just a sense that the Tories have screwed it up and the country's not working.
Well, we are in a very different position, that's true. The country is much more despondent now than I think it was in 97. But I think the need is to demonstrate to people that it doesn't have to be like this. We can change things, and it's not all about money. It's about values, and it's about attitudes, and it's about just the small steps to show that politics doesn't need to be so down in the dumps. It doesn't need to be so corrupt and unwelcoming. I think that's the things we can change, and that mood change, I think, will enthuse the public.
You and I have known each other a long time. Just finally, Steve, is there a sense for you, as there was in the dying months of Gordon Brown's regime, like Rishi Sunak, he never won a general election, never had a mandate, there was no leadership election amongst Labour MPs, it was a coronation, effectively a coronation for Rishi. Didn't matter what Gordon Brown did in the end, the country decided time was up. You lot have been in power for, 13 years? This lot been in power nearly 14 years. Are we in the same period?
I think there's a lot of similarities. Keir said at an event last night that he'd been at this is his third-party conference, and he's faced 3 different prime ministers already. Yeah. I think there's a sense the Tories have run out of roads, and I felt I saw that in Manchester last week.
All right, that's Steve McCabe. He is the Labour MP for Birmingham Selly Oak. Thanks for joining us. I'm keeping you here at the Labour Party conference. Keep telling us your thoughts and all your talking points. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.com. We're coming up to the headlines now. The time is 11:31.
So I have got a few of those emails to read you. Andrew, thank you. There in Liverpool, Jonah says, so Sir Keir Starmer's going to scrap the Rwanda plan. No surprises there. He seems to be following in the same footsteps as Blair, Brown and Miliband. They seem to want to swamp Britain with immigrants just to increase their votes. And Craig is saying, why do we still have VAT? It was invented for Europe. We're not in that anymore. And that was because Sacha Lord from the Nighttime Industries was talking to Andrew in Liverpool about the impact on hospitality of the last few years. Alan is looking at the Labour Party conference and saying all small-time gimmicks, no substantive policies. And Alan has said, and this is because the Rwanda project is in the Supreme Court today, and Alan has said the last attempted flight to Rwanda tried to fly the grand total of 9 immigrants out of the country. How ridiculous is it to use a 100-plus seater for that? You're right, Alan, and it didn't even get off the ground. It might do in the next few days, but at least we will get the green light as to whether it can be possible or not. So more than 700 people have been killed in Israel since Hamas launched its attacks. On screen, we are seeing pictures of a refugee camp that was hit by Israeli airstrikes this morning. We'll bring you the very latest, that and much more after your morning's news with Tamsin.
Bev, thank you. Here are the headlines at 11:32. Israel's defence minister has ordered a total blockade on Gaza, cutting off food, fuel and electricity. Israeli media says 300,000 reservists have been called up in the largest ever draft in the country. Israel declared war after a surprise attack by the terrorist group Hamas on Saturday. More than 700 people have been killed in Israel and nearly 500 in Gaza. Well, here are some live pictures of Israeli soldiers gathering in Ashkelon near Gaza. A spokesperson for the Israeli Defence Force says Israel will restore security to its people. The government is defending its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in the Supreme Court. Over the next 3 days, several cases, collectively known as the Rwanda Appeals, will challenge the Court of Appeal's decision to halt resettling refugees. Some judges think there are issues with Rwanda's asylum system, making the government's plan wrong, but not everyone agrees, with one judge saying the challenge should be thrown out. More than 400 criminals have been jailed for a total of more than 3,700 years after an operation by the Met Police. Operation Eternal investigated organised crime groups over a 3.5-year period by targeting an encrypted messaging platform. More than 3 tonnes of Class A and B drugs and nearly 50 guns were seized in the largest ever operation of its kind by the Met. Cleaners and security guards in Whitehall are among those going on a 5-day strike over pay. Members of the Public and Commercial Services Union will walk out today at the Energy, Business and Science departments. The workers were offered a 2.2% pay rise, with the union bosses describing it as insulting. The new action follows a strike last month. Well, those are the headlines, and you can get more on all of those stories, of course, by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2183 and 1.1570 euros. The price of gold is £1,519 and 85 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,513 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Still to come with my panel this morning. Should shoplifters lose the right to be tried by jury? We're going to be discussing that and a lot more after the break. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Very Very good morning. It's 11:39 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce in Liverpool and Bev Turner here in London. So Israel's Defence Minister has ordered a total blockade of Gaza now, cutting off food, fuel and electricity. This is the breaking news. Obviously, this story is evolving all the time. Mike Parry and Emma Wolf are with me. Mike, just your thoughts on this tragedy? We're only day 3 of this war. This is not going to get any better anytime soon.
No, it's not. I went to bed in Stockbroke of El Surrey last night, and it's the calmest, most peaceful sort of place you can live. And I thought to myself, what a life we've got here. Rockets smashing into your house in the middle of the night, men coming down the road, machine guns, smashing into your house and kidnapping your family. I mean, you can't imagine the sheer horror and terror that's going on there. And Israel is the only democracy in the whole of the Middle East. And yet they've got enemies on all sides. So whoever opens their mouth and says Israel are being a bit hard here on these people who are attacking them, no, they're fighting for their lives. The whole plot here is to try and start a movement to obliterate Israel and literally wipe it off the face of the earth. That's Iran's plan. And Iran almost certainly have funded this and planned it over a number of months. It's a determined effort to try and get rid of Israel.
What do we do with the information about the fact that Biden has given Iran $6 billion in humanitarian aid only recently?
Yeah, this is a very sort of contentious issue. It's not just that money. What he did was he handed over $6 billion and got 5 political prisoners back in return. The money was not allowed to be paid directly to the Iranian government, but once you know there's an inflow of $6 billion into your national economy, wherever it is, you can get money elsewhere. But the real issue was Afghanistan. Once the world saw that Biden was so disinterested in America, the world policeman, exercising its right to try and keep countries stable, they thought, we're going to have a go here. This wouldn't have happened, in my view, under Donald Trump. This morning, President Biden has announced sending an aircraft carrier and 6 support ships to get into the Middle East to rattle a sabre. Too late, because Donald Trump would have sent an aircraft carrier weeks ago because they'd have found out this was happening. They'd have known.
You see, that's interesting because Piers Pottinger was in here earlier, political commentator, Emma, and he was saying that under Trump we would be in a more potentially dangerous situation because we know that Trump could be unpredictable and perhaps a little trigger-happy. But we had an amazing period of peace under his leadership in America.
We did, and I think this is going to be a real test, not only of the international community's response, but of President Biden. And there's been all sorts of concern about, you know, whether he's actually compos mentis, whether he's
who is making the decisions?
But he can't bumble his way through this one. And as you say, Mike, he's announced this morning, that he's, sending warships and jets into...
That's right.
Into the Middle East. And this is... I'm not even talking about what sides are on. It's simply imagine the individuals involved, the young babies, the children.
Absolutely.
All the images we've seen all weekend of young partygoers festival, there's outdoor raves, the young German tattoo artist, the young woman.
The beautiful young girl.
His body was paraded through the streets of Gaza and spat upon. I mean, these are all... And the hostages, the situation for hostages now is unimaginable.
And it calls for Western support.
Yeah, it does call for Western support.
And it took us a while to get that flag even onto the Prime Minister's house.
I totally agree. And Emma's quite right about the Biden situation. This is a time in the world when you need a President of the United States who's thinking straightforwardly, thinking positively. Now, it's all very well for your correspondent earlier to have said it could have been more dangerous under Donald Trump. But... if memory serves me right, Donald Trump negated the threat of North Korea in the world. He was always threatening the little man who runs North Korea to press the nuclear button. Soon as Trump got in and said, you got a button, I've got a bigger button than you. Forget it. And we didn't hear from him again. So, in my view, if you stand up to these brutal dictators like Trump did, I think you've got a better chance of getting a result because they only respect force.
But was President Biden asleep on his watch? I mean, where was the intelligence? OK, for the civilians on the ground, this came out of a clear blue sky on Saturday morning in the most shocking way.
Totally agree.
Why was this not seen? Why did Biden not know about this?
So many questions, but why did the IDF not seem to know about it?
Why did Mossad not know about it? Mossad have got the tentacles around the world for terrorism.
This
they should have known
happen.
about it. Yeah.
It's extraordinary. I mean, there are questions to be answered. I guess in the fullness of time, those are the questions and the investigations that will be done. I suppose suppose, Emma, in the short term, there will be, of course, leaders all around the world, particularly in the Middle East, in the Gulf states, but also here and in America. What do we do now, and how do we stop this bleeding out into the rest of the world? I have a very bad feeling about this.
I have a very, very bad feeling about this. And, you know, it's going to be ground invasion, and we've already seen what's happening in Gaza now in retaliation. No one can blame.
And also, just given the value of oil and gas right now, Mike.
Well, listen, whenever they have trouble in the Middle East, people go for gold, don't they? And the oil price starts rising. The whole objective of this was to stop a new deal happening between Israel and Saudi Arabia. They were very close to coming together. Israel have deals with Jordan and with Egypt and that part of the world. If they could have sealed it with Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia and Iran are big enemies as well. So Iran didn't want that because of the Saudi Arabian wealth. But I totally agree with you about where does it go here. And do you know what their plan is? Their plan is that, well, the West will support Israel for a while, but then they might get war weary, which is exactly the same plan that Putin is undertaking in the Ukraine, hoping eventually the West will just get weary about defending a country a long way away. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, you know, arms manufacturers will be celebrating today. That's
absolutely.
The tragedy is in war, somebody is always profiting somewhere. Right, thanks for your contributions on that, guys. It's so important. Right. Should we talk about no, I want to talk about the free speech czar, Emma.
Yeah.
So free speech is something that we absolutely uphold here at GB News. It is in our DNA. And I'm delighted to say that the university's organisation, what are they called? The Office for Students. Office for Students, thank you, have appointed a free speech director. Feels about time, but is he political?
So, no, he says he's politically neutral. This is Professor Arif Ahmed. He comes from Cambridge. He says he's politically neutral. He doesn't want to get involved in the culture wars. He's launching his mission today at King's College with a speech all about how being offended, jokes, satire, being challenged, having views that you don't agree with, shock horror, are part of the educational experience. He wants to defend the rights of academics, students, visiting speakers to speak. We've seen lots of no platforming. We've seen loads of kind of issues around people, you know, the trans issue, for example, on university campuses. And Professor Ahmed is saying he's politically neutral, and he's saying he says we will be equally vigorous in defending free speech rights of students, academics and speakers, and that he has no interest in the culture wars.
This is good news, Mike.
Well, it's really good news, and it's come out of the blue. You know, I didn't know this guy was going to be appointed.
Who is this guy?
And I'm thinking, wow, we're pushing back against those cancel culture. The best line is, he says, I understand the chilling effect of groupthink. So he's really getting into the idea that 14 people sending out Twitter messages could close down, you know, a speaker at a university because they personally feel offended. I think it's great.
What's really interesting in this article in the Times is that Britain has fallen significantly down the rankings. There are rankings for academic freedom. We are dropping way down because of this terrified cancel culture, this no platforming culture. And he wants to reverse that.
That's right. I read another piece, you know, a couple of weeks ago, which I could barely believe, but it says that kids growing up now in teenage years, a certain percentage of them have never been told how to assess an argument from somebody else which is directly opposed to theirs. Some kids and teenagers don't think it's right for anybody to have a view which is contrary to their own.
It was the boss of Channel 4, I can't remember her name, but she was talking at a television conference only a couple of weeks ago, and she said the problem with the young people that she's trying to employ at Channel 4 is that they believe that they can't work with people whose opinions aren't the same as theirs.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, why has that happened? That's happened because of a perpetually offended generation who think they have a right to say, you can't say that.
And I'll tell you what's really alarming. My 3-year-old told me the other day, when I told him to put his socks on, he said, I have rights. And he started listening. And this is a song.
Welcome to the world of education.
They have taught him at nursery, we have rights. I don't know how it goes. And then it lists your rights. And all of them, I accept that he has those rights to something about a warm home and a food and a this and a that and education and da-da-da-da-da. But I just found it really odd that 3-year-olds are being told, you have rights, you can say no, there's da-da-da.
Yes, well, my children's primary school also had this thing on the wall saying things like, you have a right to be heard. And I was saying to my kids, Not always.
Exactly.
Not always, actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes as a
the parent
child
is in charge.
You don't have a right to be heard. That's one of the points about being an adult, is when you're an adult, you can have your voice heard, but as a child, sometimes you have to just shut up and do it. You do what you're told.
Our new Director of Free Speech says freedom of speech and academic freedom are fundamental to higher education. Isn't that one of the basic rights that we all grew up with? Why does that have to be explained?
What is education if it's not to hear opposing views and to make up your mind based on opinions and facts and hearing from other people?
Well, I'm glad there's a good news story on free speech. Anyway, right, what is this about shoplifters? Shoplifting is a hideous issue in this country at the moment. People are just going into stores, they're helping themselves, they're walking out and not being, never mind arrested or charged or anything. So what's happened, Emma? They're talking about changing the jury process.
So now, if you're a convicted repeat offender, and it's not very likely that anyone is because the police are not convicting anyone for shoplifting, but the crime has gone off the scale. It's costing 8 million offences. It's costing around £1 billion a year to retailers. From now on, convicted offenders under these plans, under these proposals, will not have the right to have their case heard in the Crown Court. So there's a huge backlog at the Crown Court of serious, really serious crimes like rape, violence, things like that.
Thousands of cases.
And now, it's not as though shoplifters won't get their say. They will be heard by a magistrate, which I think is absolutely right. Why should they be clogging up the Crown Court with a crime that they have committed themselves?
Exactly.
Great idea. People need...
It is a great idea. £1 billion is the bill now that retailers in this country have suffered over the last 12 months. Yeah, I was going to say from shoplifting. Yeah, from shoplifting. The idea that some scallywag, you know, who's a repeat shoplifting offender, can simply push the consequences of it away by saying to the police who arrested, by saying to a magistrate, I want to go before a jury, is so ludicrous as to be unthinkable that it could happen even for a first-time shoplifter. Why would you jam up the courts with this when the courts need to get on with doing things that keep our country safe?
What do you think is behind this shoplifting epidemic, Emma? We've never had more surveillance in these shops.
It's very odd. Well, the surveillance is not being followed up.
It's not working.
Often
They just
in the
wear a
smaller
mask
shop
and whatever.
Yeah, but even if they have footage, the police don't. Look, we don't have enough police.
But why are people shoplifting? Because is it just poverty?
It's not people going in. It's not people going in and taking lavatory paper and baby food. This is gangs going in, stealing to order, stealing the expensive things, the razor blades, the huge amounts
bottles
of food,
of champagne,
pouring it into their bags and leaving the store with utter impunity. This is not a result of the cost of living crisis.
No,
that is, you know, of course that shoplifting is still happening. But I think we have to be clear. This is a culture of, you know, the police aren't going to follow me up.
Isn't it a culture of I can deserve it. I can just take it. If it's not the state looking after me, then I'll just go and nick something.
I don't think it is. I think it's a culture of I know I can get away with this, so I'm going to do it.
Exactly.
That's what I think it is. Because, you know, when I was a kid, if you walked out of a shop with a Mars bar, you were worried you might walk into a policeman. If you got 12 yards down the street, you might hear the whistle. You, shoplifter, thief.
Or your parents might find out and tell you off.
Exactly.
You know.
But the reason a lot of these people do this is they think, I know somebody who goes shoplifting. They never get caught. They come with loads of free goods. I think I'll go do it myself.
But I also wonder if it is a parenting failure of the last sort of 10 to 15 years as well.
Of family breakdowns as well.
You know, my son, when he was about 10 years old, had a mate, and they went into a shop near a beach, and his mate nicked a few bits and pieces, and I saw it in the pocket, and I marched them both back into the shop, and I made them apologise to the shopkeeper and put it back on. They'd never stole anything again. But people don't do that so much, do they? Right, it's been lovely to see you. Thank you for keeping me company while Andrew's been away. Mike Perry, Emma Wolfe.
Lovely.
Right, Mark Longhurst and Pip Thompson will be here with the live desk next. What's coming up today, Pip?
Hi, Bev. Well, we will bring you the very latest on the Israel-Hamas war. We have a great lineup of analysts and commentators to tell us exactly the latest that is happening. We'll be asking whether there is now going to be an Israeli ground invasion as Israel declares a complete siege of Gaza. We're also, of course, live from the Labour Party conference when in the next few minutes, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will be speaking.
OK, we've come to the end of the show for this morning. Thank you very much for joining me. I will be back in the studio tomorrow morning at 9:30. Andrew will still be at the Labour Party conference where Keir Starmer will be doing his big speech tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss that. Stay with GB News all day, the People's Channel.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Dry for many of us today, warm in the south, but still some rain in the north. Nowhere near as much as we saw across Scotland through the weekend, more than 100 millimetres widely across parts of central and western Scotland, leading to widespread flooding. Severe flood warnings still in force, but any rain today will be mostly light showers affecting the Western Isles into the west of the central belt. Otherwise, some brightness coming through for Scotland and more especially across the rest of the UK. There will be some sunny spells, some mist lingering around Irish Sea coasts as well as southwest England, and there'll be some high cloud about as well. But still, with the sunshine, low to mid-20s in the south and feeling warmer further north compared with the weekend as well. Now, the mist and low cloud that we see around the coast through the afternoon will push inland somewhat overnight, so some dense fog patches forming across the south and west of the UK. Meanwhile, thicker cloud returns to Scotland with some outbreaks of rain pushing in by dawn. It's a mild night, but a cloudy start to the day on Tuesday and a wet start for western Scotland. Unfortunately, that rain coming on top of the very wet ground could cause further issues. Yellow rain warning in force, 50 millimetres in places. Not as much as we saw through the weekend, but we don't need any more rain, obviously. Now, the rain will push into parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England by the end of the afternoon. Drier further south and still warm.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Boobs & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it is midday and you are with the live desk here on GB News. Coming up this Monday lunchtime.
Israel declares a complete siege of Gaza. No food, water or fuel, they say, as Hamas says a bombing has killed 4 Israeli hostages being held in the Strip. As the smoke rises, this is the live shot there, will there now be an Israeli ground invasion?
We're at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. 12 members of the Shadow Cabinet speak today, including, in the next few minutes, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who's set to say Labour will overhaul the planning system.
And the Supreme Court showdown as the Home Office brings its Rwanda appeals, challenging the decision to block refugees from being sent there. It comes as another 218 asylum seekers arrive on the Kent beaches.
Good afternoon. In the next few moments, we are set to hear from Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves as the Labour Party conference continues in Liverpool.
Well, she is expected to announce much on planning and indeed borrowing. Let's go straight to Liverpool and join our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, who is there. And Liam, in terms of the borrowing, of course, it's got this current government into problems, but she's indicating only borrow to invest, which was Gordon Brown's watchword, his golden rule.
That's right. She's very much trying to present herself as an Iron Chancellor, as Gordon Brown did. The trouble is that Rachel Reeves has got a much tougher wicket to bat on, if you like to use a cricketing analogy. Why is that? That's because borrowing costs for the British government are now at a 30-year high. Interest rates, what we call bond yields, how much financial markets and investors demand in terms of interest rates to lend to the government, they're up at 5.1%, which is a 30-year high, as I said. And already the British government under the Tories is spending every year, Mark and Pip, on debt interest, £110 billion. That's 11% of all government revenue. It's the biggest item on the government's balance sheet. They're paying on debt interest, dead money, after the NHS. So it's clear that Rachel Reeves has to be very, very careful about talking about spending money that she doesn't have and about talking about increasing borrowing from the current extent to which the British government is borrowing. It's a very difficult conundrum for her because, of course, lots of people in her party, in the Labour Party, across the trade union movement, will want the government to spend, because in their eyes, that's what a Labour government is for. But financial markets are clearly signalling that if any British government does that, Tory or Labour, then it's going to be very, very difficult and borrowing costs will go up even more.
Apologies there if you just saw some idiot with an offensive sign behind Liam. Liam, let me just quickly ask you about one of the main cornerstones of this speech is the plans for planning. The government hiring 300 new planners across the public sector and rewriting what they believe is antiquated planning rules.
Look, planning for any kind of building, whether it's residential property, commercial property, infrastructure, the system in the UK is labyrinthine. It's very, very tough to get planning permissions. Having said, and Labour, they want to unblock the planning system. They want small and medium-sized businesses to be able to get planning permission to build homes, and that's probably a legitimate thing to do. Rachel Reeves is right. Planning departments in many local authorities are stripped bare. The planning experts are often hired by the construction industry that has lots more money than the public sector. But I would say this, Pip. Across the UK, there are already over 1 million planning permissions outstanding. What does that mean? They're planning permissions for houses and flats that have been granted that haven't actually been used. And there is
Liam, we're just going to interrupt you because Rachel Reeves is at the podium, about to start.
Today, I make this commitment to you and to our country. Out of the wreckage of Tory misrule, Labour will restore our economic credibility. We will lift our living standards, make work pay, rebuild our public services, invest in homegrown industries in every corner of our country, and together we will get Britain its future back. This is a momentous week. For too long, we have gathered in these halls with the power to talk, but not with the power to do. 13 years of opposition to remind us of that eternal political truth, that it is only through power that we can put our principles into action. Under Keir's leadership, that opportunity is finally within our grasp, but only if we allow no complacency, only if we fight for every single vote, only if we work every day to show that we are the party with the discipline, with the determination, and with the vision to rebuild Britain. Labour's task is to restore hope to our politics. The hope that lets us face the future with confidence, with a new era of economic security, because there is no hope without security. You cannot dream big if you cannot sleep in peace at night. The peace that comes from knowing that you have enough to put aside for a rainy day, and the knowledge that when you need them, strong public services will be there for you and your family. The strength that allows a society to withstand global shocks, because it is from those strong foundations of security that hope can spring. Conference, the choice at the next election is this: 5 more years of the Tory chaos and uncertainty, which has left working people worse off, or a changed Labour Party, offering stability, investment, and economic security so that working people are better off. It falls to us to show that Labour are ready to serve, ready to lead, and ready to rebuild Britain. In chess, you learn to think several moves ahead. But even I couldn't have predicted the mayhem that we have seen, week after week, year after year, from this Conservative government. First, austerity, then Brexit without a plan, and then their kamikaze budget. Growth weak, wages flat, taxes up, the price of energy up, the price of the family food shop up, and mortgage bills up hundreds of pounds every single month. Never forget. This time last year, in their clamour to cut taxes for those at the top, the Conservatives caused market chaos, crashed the economy, and left working people to pay the price. That is why you can never trust the Tories with our economy ever again. What did we see last week from the Tories in Manchester? A government bereft of ambition for Britain, so ready for opposition that they're behaving like they're already there, looking inwards, not outwards, to the country, queuing to cheer the extremists rather than kicking them out of their party. And telling us what we already know. Liz Truss might be out of Downing Street, but she is still leading the Conservative Party. The one sensible thing that they came up with was their phased smoking ban, which we support. However, I do fear for the Conservative Party. With such a shortage of fag packets, what on earth are they going to write their next policy on? And what about the Prime Minister? Well, Rishi Sunak had the chance to denounce the politics and the policies of Liz Truss, to make clear that he would never repeat her mistakes. But he didn't. If he's too weak to stand up to them 1 year in, what chance do you give him 5 years in? Be in no doubt, the biggest risk to Britain's economy is 5 more years of the Conservative Party. In contrast, Labour's defining economic mission is to restore growth to Britain. But it is no use simply claiming that we want economic growth without new ideas for how we can achieve it. That starts with understanding the world as it is today, a world that has been reshaped by new technologies, by the pandemic, by war, by great power rivalries, and by the climate crisis. In short, globalisation, as we once knew it, is dead. Disruption to supply chains that span the globe has revealed the perils of prizing only the fastest and the cheapest, and our ability to make the things essential to our national security has been depleted. Great gaps have been allowed to open up between different parts of the country, and we have time and time again been buffeted by global forces. In this new age of insecurity, it is no longer enough, if it ever was, for government to turn a blind eye to where things are made or who is making them, to run an economy based on the contributions of only a few people, a few industries and a few parts of our country. A changed world demands a new business model for Britain. It is an approach that I call securonomics. That means government putting economic security first, security for family finances, and security for our national economy. It means we must rebuild our ability to do, make, and sell more here in Britain, so we are less exposed to global shocks. Governments around the world have come to understand this in a way that our government cannot. That wealth does not just trickle down from a few at the top, but rests on the contribution of the many, on the skill and dedication of those who work in our everyday economy. Care workers, postal workers, supermarket workers, and on entrepreneurs, innovators and scientists. Growth from the bottom up and the middle out. An economy rebuilt in the interests